So we were dealing with the 18th verse of the 12th chapter. Samashatraucha mitrecha tatha manapamanayohu Sidoshna sukha dukkeshu samasanga vivarjitaha. That devotee is completely free from any kind of bondage in the form of attachment, is completely non-attached, and therefore he is able to forbear all types of experiences, all dual experiences, like heat, cold, honor, dishonor, and so on, with a sense of perfect equanimity. Now, how such a devotee influences people living around him, or the places where he lives, or the places where he goes, which he visits, and so on. These ideas are clearly stated in another philosophical work of devotional literature, that is Narada's Bhakti Sutras. So Narada says, Tirthi kurvanti tirthani, sukarme kurvanti karmani, sat shastri kurvanti shastrani, etc. Such a devotee, wherever he goes, that place becomes holy. His purity, his divinity, and his spiritual stature will have their effect, their impact on wherever he goes, whoever he comes across. He is able to influence not only directly but even indirectly, because he emits a spiritual vibration all around. In fact, that is one important principle behind the idea of pilgrimage. See, a pilgrimage or a pilgrim center is called Tirtha or Tirthasthana in Sanskrit language, which actually originates from a Sanskrit root, which means something which helps you to get across a stream, a canal, to ford, to construct a bridge. You are able to cross a river. You are able to get across a stream with the help of a bridge. So, a tirtha is a place which helps you to get across the problems and difficulties of life in this world. So that's an important. That's the role of a tirthasthana. So when we go on a pilgrimage, we get ourselves purified. We get spiritually strengthened. We become spiritually equipped to face the problems. Problems are not solved, but when our strength to solve problems increases, in direct proportion to that, these big problems appear to be less and less of a problem. That's what really happens. So wherever these devotees, these enlightened souls go, those places become purified. Those places are turned into centers full of spiritual vibration. That's why all the great important pilgrim centers are associated with some spiritual personalities. Either they may have lived there or they may have visited those places. All these places you can find. Those of you who have not gone to the place where Sri Ramakrishna lived and practiced spiritual sadhana, the small room in Dakshineshwar temple, those who have not gone, you find you should make an attempt to go, and you can see the real meaning of these statements. There was a great Swami. His name was Swami Ramdas. In fact, a small magazine comes from his ashrama, Vision it is called. Most of you get this. Some of them get here. A small magazine. That Swami once visited Belumad. Then one of the direct disciples, maybe Mahapushmara, Shivanandaji, made arrangements with somebody to take this Swami to Dakshineshwar and other places associated with the life and activities of Sri Ramakrishna. So when he reached that room where Sri Ramakrishna lived, he just rolled down on the dust of the river. Sorry, that room, and he just rolled down on the floor of the room, because he wanted the dust of the room to purify his body. Now, this may appear to be a bit of a superstition or incomprehensible to staunch Vedantics, but one can reach the higher level of Vedantic meditation only after reaching a very high level of mental purity. Before we fill our mind with spiritual vibrations, we cannot really meditate, and we cannot really understand the true meaning of Advaita. That's what Shankaracharya himself says. There are 4 important qualities necessary, essential for anyone who undertakes to study Vedanta. You should have a strong sense of discrimination between the real and unreal. I mean, discerning mind which distinguishes the real from the unreal. The reality is one, Atman, Brahman, everything else is only relative. Unreal means relative. And you should be completely free from any desire for any comforts, either in this world or the next. You should not have even desire for going to heaven. That also is a bondage. It may be a bondage, it may bind you with chains of gold, but a chain made of gold is as strong as a chain made of iron. Its binding effect is not different. So, and the third qualification is you must have perfect control, internal and external. Samadhi, Sarka Sambatti, Mumukshutvam. And a strong desire for spiritual enlightenment. I mean, a strong desire for liberation from bondage. It is called sadhana chadushtaya. It is called nitya nitya vastu vivekaha igamutra phala bhoga viragaha samadhi sarkar sampatti mumukshutvam, as I said earlier. So these are the 4 essential qualifications for anyone who undertakes to make a study of Advaita. And for achieving these sadhana chadushtaya, a proper practice of devotional exercises is very helpful. So pilgrimage is one very important tool for taking our mind to a higher level of purity, so that it becomes ready for understanding the principles of Advaita. Pilgrimage, reading of holy scriptures, etc. Now, so Narada says that wherever these great enlightened devotees go, those places become holy. Whatever they do, that action itself gets a sublimation. That action itself becomes holy. So, sukarmi kurvanti karmani. Whatever they do, those activities become spiritual activities. And then whatever they write, whatever they read, they also become sublime devotional literature. These are the characteristics of an ideal devotee. Because there are certain questions which your mind will ask, which philosophy cannot answer. That's the problem. Always we are aware of an unknown factor, because there is always an invisible, inexplicable, unknown factor that is very much felt, very strongly and intensely felt, though we cannot always prove its existence in the laboratory of science. Yesterday, casually we were mentioning, even an atheist medical practitioner, before going to the operation room, will have some anxiety whether his work will come all right or not. Sometimes he may pray. Sometimes people who are suffering from some kinds of problems in this world, empirical life, though they may not believe in God, still will have, a kind of anxiety, and that takes the form of a prayer towards a higher intelligence. Now, This is very intensely brought out in one episode that is explained in the famous devotional classic. Yesterday I referred to that Bhagavata Purana. You know how this great work came to be written. How the book came to be written and how the book begins is a great spiritual lesson for any spiritual seeker. The book begins like this. So there is a great saint, Shuka. He was the one who taught Bhagavata Purana to a great king. His name was Parikshit. Now it so happened that this King Parikshit, who incidentally was the grandson of Arjuna, who is the disciple mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. This Parikshit was a powerful emperor. So one day he was hunting animals in the forest. In those days, it was the duty of kings to make forest free from too many predators, so that people won't be disturbed, and saints and sages could do their meditation in forest hermitages in perfect peace. So it kind of balanced, So this King Parikshit was going about hunting in ancient times, and it so happened that he heard a noise, and he thought maybe it is a lion, a man-eater lion whom he was hunting, was trying to drink water from a nearby stream. So it was pitch darkness. He could see a form and bending, and he shot an arrow, and suddenly he heard a noise. It was a human voice, crying and weeping and falling down dead. He had not died, but it just that form fell down. Then the king approached him. He found it was a young ascetic, a boy ascetic, who had come there to fetch water for his old blind father, who was staying far away. With a pot in his hand, with half filled water, he fell down. But he had not died. So when the king approached him, the boy ascetic said, "You have done a great wrong. So though you are a king, you are too arrogant. You have no sense of proper discerning. You don't have a discerning mind, no sense of discrimination. So you also will have to face a terrible fate. And after 7 days, the 7th day from now, you will be bitten by a powerful poisonous snake. This is called Takshaka, the Puranic literature, and you will die of snake bite." This was a curse which the boy ascetic gave to this king. And the king was terrified, and he understood that he had done a terrible mistake. So he was full of repentance, and he begged for pardon, and then the boy ascetic died. But he gave his own background. "My old father, who is blind, is sitting somewhere in a distant hermitage. Please go and give this drinking water to him. That's the least you can do under the circumstances." And this king did accordingly. So when he reached the hermitage, the old blind sage, who was expecting his son to bring drinking water, was shocked when the king explained the whole story. But he was very much worried that this king was otherwise a good, noble man, but his son, who himself was a great ascetic, had cursed him. It was very unfortunate. He should not have done it. Anyhow, he pacified him, and the king went to his palace. But the king was a wise man. He knew that he had done something wrong, so he deserved his fate. But on the 7th day, a mighty poisonous snake will bite him, and he will die. What he did, generally, if you feel that you are going to die after 7 days, anybody, you may have 7 into 24 hours to live. That will be a terrible shock, and people will start weeping and crying and full of anxiety. But this king was perfectly calm and quiet, because he was a great devotee. Though he made a great mistake in shooting his arrow towards an invisible object, he knew, because he was a great devotee, he knew that he had done something wrong, and he felt he deserved this fate. And he relinquished his kingdom, his comforts, his palace, all. And he made his own son, eldest son, as the heir apparent, and crowned him as the next king, and he left his he left his palace and went to a forest on the banks of river Ganga, the holy river of ancient India. Now, great saints and sages came to know of this. And they knew that this king was a great devotee, but somehow, accidentally, he made a mistake. So, if a devotee, even if he commits a mistake, he won't lose his balance. Samashatrauja mitrecha means he will have no hostility towards his enemies, and he will not be obsessed with attachment towards his friends. And again, he will be able to forbear whether pain and pleasure, whatever comes, with a sense of equanimity. He was a great devotee. So he went to the forest on the banks of the river Ganga, and now many saints and sages heard about this episode. So they were full of admiration for this emperor. Because of his great devotion, he could forbear all this, and instead of being swallowed by anxiety and fear, he had the perfect equanimity of mind, and he left everything, and he wanted to spend the next 7 days in complete concentration and contemplation on God. So he came to the banks of the river Ganga. Now many saints and sages came to know of this, and Shuka, the greatest sage of those times, also arrived. When Shuka himself appeared before the king, he was overwhelmed. The greatest saint, ascetic of ancient India, had himself come to see him, hearing about this great episode. And then this king puts a question to this sage. See, the question put by a man who had only 7 days to live. He was not afraid of death. He says, Atha prichami samsiddhim yoginam paramam gurum purusha seha yat karyam mriyamanasya sarvatha. Ikartavyam adho japyam and so on. The question continues. The first question is this. Atha prichami samsiddhim yoginam paramam gurum. He addresses Shuka as the master yogin. I am going to ask you a question. What should a dying man do? Mriyamanasya yad karya. Mriyamana is somebody whom death is staring at his face. A man who is about to breathe the last. What should such a man do? That was the question put by this king to the great ascetic, the great saint of those days. And the entire Bhagavata Purana, which is an immortal devotional classic, is an answer to this question. What should a dying man do? Because the mystery of death solves the mystery of life also. Because death is nothing but disappearance of the physical body. Now, in fact, all transcendental philosophical speculations originate from this fundamental question: what is the mystery of death and what is the mystery of life? Both questions are the same. That was the great question which Nachiketa himself puts to the Lord of Death in another ancient Vedic text, Kathopanishad. Eyam prade vijigitsa manushi asti tige nayam asti dichaigi edad vidyam anasishtastoyaham varanam esha varastrutiyah. I won't go into the details of the story, but here a young boy, his name is Nachiketa. He puts a question. He asks for a boon, asks Yama for a boon. What's a boon? Some people say after death, when this body perishes, nothing is left. And according to some other people, something continues to exist. Some people say death is the end of the journey of life. And according to some people, it is only a semicolon. It is not the end of the journey. Now, please teach me the mystery of this. So here also Nachiketa is asking for an explanation of the mystery of death Because life itself is, for a wise man, life itself is an intelligent preparation for dying intelligently, not with misery on his face. And dying intelligently means facing the mystery of death as a creative crisis, as something which is inevitable, not something to be scared of. In fact, when Nachiketa puts his question, the next passages in the Upanishad constitute the description of the highest metaphysical, Vedantic metaphysics of Vedic tradition. Here also, when Parikshit asked Shuka for an explanation of what a dying man should do, or rather, how should a man face the crisis of death? In answer to this, of course, this comes at the end of the 19th chapter of the first skandha, or maybe 18th, and then at the beginning of the next second skandha, second book of Bhagavata Purana, Shuka begins a detailed exposition. Here, Atha Prichami Samsiddhim Yoginam Paramam Gurum Purusha Seha Yadkaryam Priyamanasya Sarvata. It means, what should a dying man do? Then, in answer to this question, Shuka says, Etavan Sankhi Yoga Abhyam Sudharma Parinishtaya Janma Labha Parapumsam Ante Narayana Smriti. So, Ante Narayana Smriti is the answer. Means, when you breathe your last, you must have the thought of God in your heart and the holy name in your mind. Holy name of God in your mind. This is from the devotional point of view. From an Advaitic point of view, one should be able to feel within him that is one with the Supreme Reality. Jiva Brahma Aikyam, as we call in Vedantic tradition. That is from the Advaitic point of view. So from a devotee's point of view, the highest goal in human existence is to die with the holy name of God in mind and heart. So, Ante Narayana Smriti. And this is possible through Jnana Yoga, that is Sankhya Yoga Abhyam, Sudharma Parinishtaya. So, three parts are mentioned here. Sankhya means Jnana Yoga. Yoga means psychic control, Raja Yoga. And Sudharma Parinishtha means Karma Yoga. Either by contemplating on Brahman and the unity of Jivatma and Paramatma, individual soul or universal soul, or by doing your duty without any desire as Karma Yoga, means work and worship the same, by looking upon every act of your life as the worship of the Lord. Every moment as an act of contemplation on the Lord. This is one option. Or by completely controlling your mind, psychic control. By any means, one should be able to leave this world with memory of God. This is the ultimate goal of human existence. This is the answer given by Shuka. Before that, King Parikshit advances a few more questions. Whom one should worship, what one should think, what one should contemplate on, how one should meditate, how one should worship, and what one should not do. That question also is Bruhi Yedva Vipareyam. That is also part of the question put by Parikshit. What one should do and what one should not do. So in response to this, first Shuka explains what one should not do and then explains what one should do. This is the Bhagavata Purana. So you find this is the beginning of the great Bhagavata Purana. So you can find on the one hand you have a great devotee who is the very embodiment of all these great qualities, or at least was trying to acquire all these great qualities explained in the 12th chapter and elsewhere in the Gita, and also in other devotional literature like Shandilya Suktas and Narada Sutras and so on. Then you know how the author of Bhagavata Purana came to write this work. That is a much more touching story. Vyasa is one of the greatest figures of India's spiritual, Vedantic spiritual and philosophical tradition. Vyasa was the one who divided the entire Vedic literature, which was one, the beginning, into Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda. He taught Rigveda to Paila, Yajurveda to Vaishambhayana, and Samaveda to Jaimini, and Atharvaveda to Sumantu. So Paila, Vaishambhayana, Jaimini, and Sumantu. These are the four great disciples who learned these four Vedas from Vyasa. And he wrote the great Vyasa Sutras and Brahma Sutras. And he had written the Vyasa Smriti also. And in fact, he has written the great Mahabharata, which is, mind you, no less than 100,000 verses, which almost 7 times as big as Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid put together. That's the size of the book. According to the smallest version, shortest version, according to the bigger version, Mahabharata contains nearly not only 100,000 verses, but around 45,000 verses more. So that's the size of the book. So this Vyasa was not an ordinary man. He was a highly enlightened person, a great scholar, a great philosopher, a great sage, and great ascetic, and all that. But he felt worried, an inner emptiness within. Sometimes it happens, he may be a big industrial captain, you may be on a multinational company, you may have everything that this world can offer. Not only in terms of wealth, but in terms of intellect, in terms of education, everything. Still, Vyasa felt an inner emptiness, a void within. Something wanting, something lacking. So one day he was sitting on the banks of the Saraswati river. And then Narada appeared there, the great philosopher Narada, who is the author of Narada Bhakti Sutras. Narada defined Bhakti as Satu Asmin Parama Prema Rupa. Yesterday we discussed Bhakti or devotion is in the nature of highest supreme love for God, etc. Now, this Narada asked Vyasa, why are you worried? Why are you anxious about something? You look a bit discontented. You have everything. You have written, you have edited the entire Vedic literature. You have written Mahabharata, in which you have given a detailed exposition of the very concept of dharma, virtues, what one should do, what should not do, all that you need to lead a virtuous life. Everything is written in Mahabharata. Still Vyasa was not happy. Many of the characters in Mahabharata were much more happy than its author himself. So Narada puts a question. Now, Narada says, look here, and Vyasa explained that he was facing a big inner crisis, dilemma, which he himself could not explain. Then Narada said, you are right, you have written everything. You have written great philosophical works like Vyasa Sutra, Vedanta Sutras. And you have written Vyasa Smriti, Mahabharata, everything. And you have given a detailed exposition of dharma. Dharma, you can say, code of conduct. Dharma stands for the totality of all the human virtues. What one should do, what should not do. That's one way. Difficult to explain what dharma actually implies, because it is so expansive in its meaning and implication. But we can say dharma is that which preserves human life at the cosmic level and also at the individual level. All the values, virtues including dharma. Now, but there is one problem with dharma. Dharma is neuter. Because in Mahabharata you find Yudhishthira has his dharma, his interpretation of dharma. Bhishma, the great spiritual enlightened man, had his own interpretation of dharma. And Duryodhana, the villain of Mahabharata, has his own understanding of dharma. He has his own justification. You ask any criminal, he will have a lot of justification for committing crimes. And he will, and if he gets a very good attorney, he may get a good verdict also from the court of law. So dharma in a way, constitution is part of dharma. So dharma is neuter. Dharma doesn't tell you what you should do at a particular moment. For that, you need a grand example who have embodied the best of dharmic principles. And for that, you have to write a book giving all the details of Lord Krishna's life and teachings. That alone can satisfy a devotee. A devotee may not be satisfied with threadbare interpretations of the finer aspects of constitution, morality or anything. Because the idea of the philosophy of dharma doesn't address you directly. It doesn't tell you what you should do, whom you should follow, how to learn your lessons from a practical example. So, in response to Narada's advice, Vyasa wrote Mahabhagavata. And in Bhagavata Purana, Vyasa gives a detailed description of Lord Krishna's teaching, his life, which itself was a practical demonstration of all that a devotee should learn and practice in his life. So that means about it. Now the next verse is 19th verse. Tulya ninda sudir mauni sandushto yena kenajit anikeda sthiramatihi bhaktiman me priyo naraha. This is the 19th verse. So, a devotee, he remains unattached, is always contented, and he is alike in heat and cold. He won't have anything which he is attached to, or he would feel everything is his. Both are the same in actual practice. Either you can say you don't have a home, or you can say the entire universe is your home. Both are right. You can say you don't have any friends, any people whom you can call your own. That is one way. From the positive angle, you can say the entire humanity is your. All the entire human family, the entire humanity is your family. All the human beings are your friends or your brothers. This is the attitude of a real devotee. Now, among such devotees, there will be perfect equanimity in their interaction among themselves. Narada Bhakti Sutra says, Nasti teshu jadi vidya rupa kula dhana kriyadi bhedaha. There will be no difference. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, devotees belong to a class by themselves. That's why those who are really devoted to God cannot see any distinction between other devotees and himself. It becomes a kind of spiritual democracy. There will be no distinction on the basis of either your birth, your education, your status, or your wealth, or your position, or anything. A devotee will have the same equanimity of mind in his approach, in his attitude towards all people in the world. And not only that, he won't feel elated when he is praised, he won't feel depressed when he is insulted. Santushto yena kenachit means he will be happy whatever he gets. In another context, in Bhagavata Purana says, somewhere or other, one should try to fix your mind on God. This is the goal. Yena kenapi upayena mana krishne nivesayet. Advice given by Bhagavata Purana. One should somehow try to fix his mind on a transcendental higher ideal. And from a devotional point of view, one should try to keep his mind fixed on a God. One important point I often stress, the word God can create some misunderstanding. Vedantic God is the indweller, the immanent reality, which is present in all living beings and who is omnipresent, immanent from a subjective angle, omnipresent from an objective standpoint, and who is transcendental, whose presence is felt not only in all human beings but in the entire creation. A devotee who has got this strong conviction is the real devotee according to Bhagavata Purana. So we have to get a clear understanding of the Vedantic concept of God. Vedantic concept of God, not somebody who creates this world and stands apart from the world. Rather, Vedantic God is the indweller. In Sanskrit we call Antaryami. Antaryami is, in fact, in Brihadaranyaka tradition, the word Antaryami is used as a synonym for God. Antaryami, Ishvaraha. These two terms are used to imply the same reality in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad tradition. So God is not an extraterrestrial entity. God is not somebody who asks to believe in Him. God is a reality which is present in all living beings. This presence of God has to manifest more and more through our life, through our activities, through our attitude towards other human beings. And the best sign of a real devotee is that he looks upon the entire humanity as non-different from himself. That's the sign of highest devotee. He won't see any distinction anywhere. That's why Narada made this point very clear. Nasti teshu jati vidya rupa kula dhana kriyadi bheda. Devotees see no distinction among anyone. For him, the entire humanity is his family. That's why Swami Vivekananda once defined this attitude as the criterion, as the foundation of the highest concept of morality and ethics. The infinite oneness of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, and all good actions. That's what Swamiji said in Practical Vedanta. Of course, he said this in the context of Vedantic philosophy, but this applies to a devotee of the highest type also. As I said yesterday, at the experience level, the path of devotion and the path of Vedanta, the path of philosophy are the same at the experience level. Because in devotional, in spiritual life, we pass through three lower levels before we reach the level of experience. First, we practice some rituals, or we practice spiritual sadhana as a ritual. At this level, there may be differences between individuals, different devotees. And then beyond ritual, there is mythology, stories of great devotees, great kings. Some of them are historical, some of them may not be so very historical. Mythology. At this level also, there may be diversity, there may be differences between different devotees. At the still higher level, philosophy. There may be a lot of common factors at philosophical level. But the experience level, all devotees speak the same thing. Speak, maybe using different languages, different terminologies, different terms, but they imply the same. So surprisingly, if you read the works of Eckhart and great devoted mystics like Narada, you find a surprising degree of similarities. Greatest mystics, those who have had a glimpse of this experience in any religious or spiritual tradition, they all speak about the same experience. Maybe the language they use may be different. So that's the idea behind. And all such devotees, thiramati, means they their conviction is well established. They will have no doubts about all this. And then in the last verse of this 12th chapter, Lord Krishna says, Yedu dharmya amritamidam yadhoktam paryupasade saddadhana mat paramaha bhaktaha te ativa me priyaha. Lord Krishna says, whosoever even seek to follow the virtuous path towards immortality, amritam means immortality. Those who follow the path of devotion, they attain immortality, because their goal is immortality. And when they attain immortality, when they reach immortality, they discover that the goal which they were searching ultimately at the experience level is not different from they themselves. Means through devotional exercises, we are manifesting more and more of the immanent presence of God within all of us. So all reading, sacred reading, meditation, puja, worship, confession, prayer, whatever may be, all these are only attempts to bring out this immanent presence of the Divine Spirit in every activity of our life. So the whole life becomes spiritualized. Here Lord Krishna says, so anybody who seeks to follow this path to immortality that he has already explained, with a mind full of faith and full acceptance of God as the supreme goal, all such seekers, men and women, are my devotees. That's what Lord Krishna says. And in an earlier chapter, in the 11th chapter, Lord Krishna has made a very important statement here. In the 11th chapter, he said, Bhaktya tu ananya shakyaha aham evam vidhorjuna jnadum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha parantava. This verse is given in the 11th verse. Here, the Lord Krishna says, only through unwavering, concentrated devotion, one can attain the supreme reality. A devotion which is single-minded, which is unswerving, alone can one reach this supreme goal. So, bhaktya tu ananya shakya aham evam vidhorjuna. Now, one may very well ask this question. As I said, of course, this is related to a subject a topic we discussed earlier. The great anxiety of many seekers and devotees is, this appears to be a very distant and remote goal, which may not be easily practical. So the very grandeur of the ideal is sometimes frightening for many ordinary seekers. We already explained the 6th chapter, where Lord Krishna very clearly states that whatever little you practice will remain there, and it will have its result, if not in this life, in the next life. Purvabhyasena tenaiva. This means, whatever you have done, whatever little spiritual practice you have practiced some time in the past, will have its benefit even in this life. Sometimes some people, in the life of some great devotees, you find some people begin their life with some spiritual practices. When they are young, during the years when they are growing up, they they undergo some spiritual practices, and then there will be complete deviation from that path. And then towards the end of their life, sometimes, accidentally or otherwise, they stumble upon the previous samskaras and they will continue their journey. And that sometimes becomes kind of a revelation for many of them. There is such a similar story stated in the great classic Bhagavata Purana. It's called the story of Ajamila. Ajamilobhakhyanam it is called. It is also well known, one of the most celebrated stories, often repeated in all discourses related to devotional philosophy. Ajamila was a very good devotee when he was quite small. When he was growing up, when he was this teenager. He had a good upbringing. His parents brought him up very well. And he was a very virtuous man, a good devotee. But then it so happened that he had a fall. In his life, he had a terrible fall. It means he got into the company of undesirable hooligans and immoral people. He became a drug addict, a drunkard, and a profligate. And ultimately, he became a shame to his own family, a big burden. This is how the story goes. And when he got into this bad company, he lost memory of his previous spiritual practices that he had performed when he was growing up. And he, instead of doing his duty properly, he neglected his children, he tortured his parents, and some of them went away and they died, committed suicide. All the terrible things happened in his family. But he had one son, and the son's name was Narayana. Narayana is one of the names of Lord Vishnu. So this man, he had forgotten all about the good things he had done in his previous life. So when he was just about to die, he was in a helpless condition. He called to his side his son's name. Maybe he didn't mean to call the name of God. His son's name was Narayana. And hearing this, it is said that Lord Vishnu himself sent his messengers, his people, and took him to Vaikuntha, Surga, heaven. This is how the story goes. Of course, you have to know all these stories, according to Vyasa, the author himself, are narrated with a message behind. Story by story itself may not appear to be really relevant for a reader who doesn't understand this principle. Vyasa himself makes this point very clear. These Puranas have got a different dimension, In Gita, Upanishads and these books, facts are stated very clearly. There is no mythology, no exaggeration, nothing. But in Puranic literature, you find there is a lot of exaggeration. That's just like, you can just compare Ramayana, Mahabharata and such stories like Puranas. There are Itihasas, these are Puranas also. Mythological stories. But each one of this story has got a great spiritual purport, a spiritual meaning behind it. The meaning is this, and the commentator of Bhagavata Purana, Sridhar, and other commentators have very often stated the real meaning of many of these stories behind. The idea is this: this man had done many good things, he had undergone many spiritual practices when he was growing up, when he was small. But later he had a deviation in his life. And he was about to die. And now normally, according to mythological tradition, he would have gone to hell. But in his case, he happened to call the name of God, though he didn't mean that. So the story is this, those who have done some good things in their past will somehow stumble upon the result of their good deeds by the grace of God. Otherwise, he would not have called his son's name. He would have helplessly cried and wept and all that. But he happened to call. And according to some interpreters, he was really calling Narayana. These are different. Bhagavata has got number of interpretations. Because suddenly he remembered his life when he was growing up. He had a good life. And he was full of repentance. He called on the name of God. And it had a great effect, and his whole past was neutralized and Lord himself came to save him. This is another interpretation. But idea is this: whatever little we practice, it won't be lost. It will remain, and it will ultimately become a chain, a link, which will connect our spiritual practices in this life with what spiritual practices we may perform in the next life. So this connecting link will be there. So that's why these Bhakti Shastras repeat again and again that we must always try to somehow fill our mind with ideas, positive ideas, which help us to lead a proper, virtuous life. Very often, sometimes many people ask this question: how can we inculcate these ideas in the new generation, among the new generation? I can just quote one convocation address from the Vedas, and then I can explain this point. In ancient times, children used to be sent to forest hermitages for undergoing Vedic education. So there is one convocation address in the Yajurveda, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, where a teacher, after completing one academic year, gives some instructions to his disciples. When the disciple had completed his education and was about to go home after he had completed the study of the Vedas, there he says one important instruction given is Matradevo Bhava, Pitudevo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Aditi Devo Bhava. Another one is Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara, Satyana Pramidavyam, Dharmana Pramidavyam. I'm just quoting a few words. It really begins Vedam, Anuchi, Acharya, and Devasina, Manishastri. That's how the convocation begins. But I'm not going to those details. The idea is this: the teacher instructs the disciple. You should speak the truth. You should never deviate from truth. You should practice dharma, and you should never deviate from the practice of dharma. And you should respect your parents and your parents and your teacher and your guest as much as you honor God himself. This is the statement. Now, if parents feel that children are not treating them this way, it's because parents give their children everything other than spiritual food. So the best of education parents give to their children. The best of food they give, but not the best of spiritual or moral education. So sometimes it is stated in some books related to modern ways of life, in direct proportion to the number of kindergartens, there is an increase of old age homes. So the more and more parents send their children to kindergartens and daycare homes where paid servants look after their children, in direct proportion to that, children also will dump their parents in old age homes to be looked after by paid servants. So both ways it happens. So many modern psychologists and sociologists very often refer to some of these ideas. I mean, these spiritual ideas should be inculcated to the new generation, growing generation by their parents. And if parents do not do that, they have no right to complain that their children are not treating them properly. Because if you give spiritual food, they will become spiritual personalities. They will return in equal measure. But if you give only secular food, secular education, then they will behave accordingly. These ideas are very often repeated. Why I am making this statement? In many modern books by sociologists, they say that some of these ideas have got a great relevance in modern times in developing integrated personalities in society in general, and especially among the growing generation. Now I think we'll have about 30 minutes, more than 30 minutes for interaction. You can ask any question directly related to this text or in general related to the topic we have been dealing with. Thank you.
such as, let's see, Matru, Maitri, Karune.
Yes. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. It is in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Here it is, Prema, Maitri, Karuna, Upeksha. Yes.
Prema, Maitri. Are these not common to Jnana also? Jnana Yoga?
Yes, that's true. As at the lower level, when you choose your tools and instruments for spiritual practice, there may be differences. But as you advance further and further and come closer and closer to your goal, differences vanish. And when you reach the goal, which is experience, there will be no differences at all. See, give an example. A devotee, a seeker who chooses the path of devotion may have to spend more time in reading holy scriptures in a very ceremonial way at the beginning stage. He may have to engage in worship, formal worship. He may have to engage in some kinds of formal practice of ritualistic practice of devotion, which is called Gauni Bhakti or secondary Bhakti at a lower level. So at that level there will be differences. But as you evolve more and more and come closer and closer to the goal, these differences vanish and similarities will increase. Now, ultimately there will be no differences, and when you reach the goal, which is experience, there will be perfect uniformity and harmony between the paths of jnanam, bhakti, karma and also yoga. That's the idea.
Continuing the question, these basic characteristics or the practices, purity, virahankara, nirmalya, so on and so forth. These we can practice. And ultimately we say, offer it to God, and then that is the ultimate. But in the case of jnana, they say, I am you, Tattwamasi. He has already, how does that, he is fixed only on that. He doesn't elevate. In the case of, as I see, the devotion path is a kind of, it accumulates, it promotes, rises. But in the case of Jnana Yoga, the thought occurs to one person and says, I am he, Tattwamasi. How is it possible?
Yes. I shall explain this point. Now, Gita himself says in the beginning, Klesho dhigadaras tesham avyaktasakta chedasam avyaktahi gadir dukkham dehavadhir avapyade. Krishna makes a very important point very clear. We didn't get time. I didn't go through the entire chapter. I did that in Lake Tahoe. See, those who have got body consciousness cannot practice the path of knowledge, path of jnana. Because you had to reach a higher level of spiritual evolution where you are convinced that you are something beyond this psychophysical mechanism. Then only you can start practicing the path of wisdom, where you say, I am Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman itself. If an ordinary man who has got body consciousness, who thinks I am the body, if he says I am Brahman, means this 140 pounds human body with hands and legs, which eats, drinks and sleeps, is Brahman, it is ridiculous. So, at the highest level, when you have transcended body consciousness, when you are already experienced that you are something beyond this mind, intellect, body, senses, all this, and you are the immanent supreme reality, then only you can say, I am Brahman, or Tattwamasi, and or one, etc. Before that, it is impossible. First of all, an ordinary spiritual seeker, Bhakti Yoga is the right path for him. Through Bhakti, if he reaches a higher level of spiritual consciousness, then when he reaches the highest level of spiritual consciousness, he can attain this goal. I can give an example. That's again from the life of Sri Ramakrishna. See, Sri Ramakrishna had practiced all kinds of devotional sadhanas. He had undergone all kinds of devotional practices before Totapuri reached Dakshineshwar. So when Totapuri looked at Sri Ramakrishna, he found he's the right man to practice Advaita. Because Totapuri immediately recognized that Sri Ramakrishna didn't belong to this world. He belonged to another level of consciousness. He had completely transcended body consciousness through the path of devotion. Through so many innumerable paths of devotional exercises he undergone. So, when Totapuri taught him Advaita sadhana, on the first mention of that Mahavakya, immediately Sri Ramakrishna had that experience. Totapuri himself had to undergo 40 years of sadhana to reach this goal. But for Sri Ramakrishna, just one word was enough. So, it depends upon how far you have reached. This is often demonstrated in the light of some examples. Suppose you are searching for something. Suppose you have lost a costly watch which you want to discover, which you want to find out. It's lying somewhere and it is something very vital. Your life depends upon getting it back. Let us believe so. And you are going in search of it. When you find it lying on the road, you will not mistake for something else. Why? Because your intense search for that object had driven away all other impressions, all other ideas from your mind. Your mind is completely concentrated on that object. So when you see that object, immediately you recognize. So those who had already undergone a lot of other spiritual sadhanas, who have reached the highest level of concentration, who have reached such a high level of what you call vritti nirodha, it is called. When they just hear once the Mahavakya, it becomes an experience for him. It is called in Vedanta, it's called Sabda Aparokshawada, one school of Vedanta. Its opposite says Prasankhyanavada or Dhyanavada. We can't discuss that point right now. It's called Sabda Aparokshawada. When you have reached the highest level of sadhana zadushta sampatti, already I explained earlier, when you have already reached the highest level of mental purity, concentration, then just one mention of Mahavakya is enough for you to experience it, but not before that. Otherwise, you have to hear it and practice it for a long time. So, for anyone who has got a strong sense of body consciousness, it is impossible for him to practice the path of Nirguna, Niragara, Nirvishesha, means the impersonal Advaitic sadhana. He can read those books, he can contemplate, and slowly he can raise his consciousness to higher and higher level. That is true. But it will take a long time. So Krishna says it is very, very difficult. It is very, very painful. That's the idea. Dehavadbhi. Mean those who have got body consciousness, for them, the practice of the impersonal is very, very difficult, almost impossible. We may feel that Advaita is the most attractive thing. It is not a matter of our choice. It is a matter of our evolution. To what extent we have grown, to what extent we have evolved, that only we can accept and practice. Just like going to a shop where you can buy an orange and apple, let me get the orange. It's your choice. So Advaita sometimes appears to be very philosophical. So I will have the best of it. So nothing less than Advaita. It is a great temptation. It is a great intellectual trap actually. Because Advaita is not just a school of philosophy, it is an experience. Shankaracharya very clearly says, it is a matter of experience. Srutya, Yuktya, Swanubhutya. Swanubhuti means one's own inner mystical experience. That's the ultimate proof of Advaita sadhana. So Advaita is not a philosophy in reality, it is an experience. And this Advaita sadhana, you cannot even begin if you have got a strong sense of body consciousness. So what should a man do if he has got a sense of body consciousness? Well, I am the servant of God. Hanuman said, Deha buddhya tu dasoham. If you have got a sense of body, I am a very strong man, hard working, I am God's servant, you can say. Somehow you establish a link between you and God. So if you have got a strong sense of body consciousness, like Hanuman had, a very powerful man. So he said, I am Lama's servant. Then he said, Jiva buddhya tu tudamsakaha, means when I feel I am the individual soul, then God, Rama, is the whole I am part. And sometimes when he felt I am the Atman, then I and you are one. But if you have the feeling that we are this body, with a mind, with emotions, with feelings, with different needs and requirements, then you say I am Brahman, means it's a terrible hypocrisy. Not only that, it's a great trap. You are stepping into something which you don't deserve, which you cannot practice. So your forward progress is blocked once for all. You don't take a path which will be useful to you, which will be conducive to your temperament. And you take a track, a path which you cannot follow, which you are not fit to follow. So our progress is blocked once for all. And Advaitic teachers are also very, very particular. You have to read Shankaracharya, not other Advaitics. Other interpreters, polemical or dialectical interpreters like Madhusudana, Chitsuga, Sriharsha, or Ananda Bodha. There are many other Advaitic polemical writers who lived in the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th and 15th century, 16th centuries, etc., even 17th century. If you read Shankaracharya's original works, you find Shankara is very clear. And not only that, even Advaitins say that so long as you have got body consciousness, you have to look upon this world as real. You have no right to look upon this world as unreal if you have got body consciousness. Intellectually we can read and understand and try to practice that conviction. But at the experience level, we common people believe this world is real. So you have to practice sadhana. So if you have got a body consciousness, you think you are God's servant and you surrender all your work, is reserved everything to God. So every action will be associated with God consciousness. So naturally God starts filling up your mind, your thoughts, your mental horizon. So that will slowly drive away all other thoughts and other thought currents, and you will become fit for Advaita sadhana, not before. That's what Sri Krishna says at the beginning of the 12th chapter. Very scientific. So remember, it is not a matter of our choice. It is a matter of our own evolution. Where we have reached, what we deserve we have to take, not what we want. What we want is a matter of our intellect. What we deserve is a matter of our mind. And man or woman, anyone, all people live at the mental level, not intellectual level. You may read a book, wonderful idea, and forget. But again you come back to the idea when you read the book again. But at other times we are living at mental level. 99% of the people lead 90% of their life at the mental level, not intellectual level. If we grasp a grand idea at the intellectual level and then try to delude ourselves into thinking that we have already reached that level, then we have a terrible blunder. Because mind is far behind, intellect has grasped wonderful ideas, Advaitic metaphysics. There is a wide gap between mind and intellect. So this gap can be filled up by sadhana. So mental level and intellectual level should be bridged. And all spiritual sadhanas, spiritual practices are meant for bridging the gap between the mental level and intellectual level. Yes, okay, thank you.
Maharaj, you made the statement that one of the sages said that Dharma cannot tell you what to do in the instance. Can you talk about the implications of that?
Yes, yes. In Mahabharata, Vyasa tried to interpret the philosophy of dharma. That's the central theme of Mahabharata. Now, dharma, you see, dharma can have independent individual interpretations. Dharma, we can say, it is, in a way, it's a codification of do's and don'ts. What is appropriate? Well, more or less, you can say, though it is related to morality, different people will have different interpretations of morality. See, constitution need not necessarily be moral. It ought to be, but may not always be. It's not so. See, before abolition, slavery was constitutional, though it may be unethical. After that, it became unconstitutional. So, what is constitutional need not necessarily in perfect agreement with the highest interpretation of ethics and morality. So, what Vyasa did in Mahabharata was to give an interpretation of the philosophy of dharma from different angles. Narada asked one question. See, did it satisfy you? No. Because, see, there is always a gap between dharma and the one who writes about dharma. In Mahabharata, you find Duryodhana gives a long exposition of his own dharma, justifying all the wicked things he did. He tried to kill the Pandavas, tried to poison Bhima, tried to insult Draupadi, and tried to take away all their wealth, tried to kill them. All such terrible things he did. It's called Adatai, means hardcore criminals. And there are wonderful evil characters in Mahabharata, Dushasana, Duryodhana, and so on. And those fellows also lived. They have their own interpretations of dharma. Duryodhana has got perfect justification for his evil deeds. Just as a lawyer, he can take any side and interpret. Now, and on the other hand, people like Drupada and others, Vidura and others, they justified the cause of Pandavas. So, Narada makes a point, by reading this Mahabharata, what should you understand? There may be people who believe that Duryodhana's party had their own justification, because Duryodhana was the son of the elder brother, though he was junior to Yudhishthira in age. So, according to some rules and regulations, the son of the senior brother has a right to succeed. But Yudhishthira was older than Duryodhana, but he was the eldest son of the junior brother, Pandu. So both had their own justifications. So whose side will you take? But reading this, do you think common people, devotees, will get any benefit? So Narada says, you write something by reading which people should feel kind of inner peace. So you write about Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna not only spoke, but also showed through his action what is the right thing. So you need a kind of demonstration of what is appropriate, not just a philosophical codification. And in Bhagavata Purana, Vyasa gives very clear and unmistakable interpretations of what is appropriate, how to lead a spiritual life. Such ideas you won't get in Mahabharata. Mahabharata is several times as big as Bhagavata Purana. But Bhagavata Purana talks directly to the devotee. So reading Bhagavata Purana, you feel elated. So it's used for ceremonial reading. When reading that, people get peace of mind. Many of our own great monks, Ramakrishna, Swami Tattwamayananda, many of the Prabhavananda, I think many of them are written about it. Mahabharata on that huge classical work, like Iliad and Homer's Iliad or Virgil's Aeneid and all that. It gives some ideas, that's all. It contains a lot of philosophy, mythology, history, literature, and so on. But Bhagavata is a spiritual classic. So it directly addresses your mind. Mahabharata addresses your heart, intellect. So that's the point which Narada makes. So dharma sometimes can be neutral. It is flexible. It can be interpreted from both sides. As we know, much can be said on both sides, as the judges used to say, That means both sides can be justified from the point of view of dharma or constitution. But when it comes to Bhagavata Purana, it is not possible. What Lord Krishna clearly taught and demonstrated in his life, it is unmistakable. It directly addresses to your heart. That's the point which Narada makes. And in response to Narada's instruction, Vyasa wrote Bhagavata Purana.
Swami, your reference to the principle that any spiritual practice that you do will
Me?
count.
Me?
Yes.
Generally, we do not discuss about our own spiritual practices.
No,
Generally, in an informal way, we discuss scriptures.
yes, I know. I mean, I'm asking about that principle, that spiritual practice counts.
Oh, yes.
In the long run, or some way
Yeah.
beyond our normal idea of relativity. And it struck me that this means that spiritual practice is not the same as good karma. Because karma must be exhausted. The
Oh,
things
yeah,
karma
yeah, yes.
are exhausted, and bad karma can
Yes.
override and overwhelm good karma.
Any kind of spiritual practice, either the path of devotion, reading holy books, associating with holy men, holy women, holy personalities, any kind of association with spiritual ideas strengthens the positive tendencies, positive samskaras, positive karmas, and weakens the negative. And as you continue this more and more, positive samskaras, spiritually healthy and helpful tendencies and attitudes will be strengthened. Any day. And if you take instruction from a teacher, all the better. Even those who do not take instruction from an individual teacher can start reading these books, can start praying, and prayer is considered to be a very effective medium for spiritual progress. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna gives more and more emphasis to prayer than meditation. So he speaks about meditation, no doubt. Prayer and even thinking, contemplation, not meditation, but contemplation, thinking about this. So somehow try to associate our day-to-day activities with some spiritual idea. That will slowly weaken the negative tendencies and strengthen and reinforce positive tendencies. That is one thing. It can be done through karma yoga. When you are practicing, when you are engaged in different activities, you can somehow associate your activities with the idea related to God or spiritual values. Or when you pray, that also is possible. So all these things is possible. Not only ritualistic practice of spiritual sadhana in the morning and evening, but also spreading out this spiritual current throughout the 24 hours of day-to-day existence. That's what Yadishwaranandaji referred to in the book Meditation Spiritual Practice. Establishing a link between our normal day-to-day activities and spiritual ideas. That's the idea. So shall we conclude now? Only 5 minutes perhaps. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram.